உள்ளதலதுள்ளகுணார் உள்ளதோ உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளலர உள்ளத்தே உள்ளதாம் உள்ளம் எனும் உள்ள பொருள் உள்ளலவன் உள்ளத்தே உள்ளபடி உள்ளதே உள்ளல் உணர்வாயே. Namo Ramana. With the immense grace of Bhagavan, who is none other than the Atman, we are in the verse number 9. To just bring it to context, we are in the Viveka Adhyaya, and the Viveka about the Ulagam, the world, was given in verses 5, 6 and 7. And from verse 8 to verse 22, it is going to be the Viveka of the Ishvara or the Mula Aham, Mula Ahankara, the Ahankara that is the source of everything. Bhagavan is going to give us the truth of that in these verses. We had seen verse number 8 that Mula Aham can be given any name. எப்பெயரிட்டு எவ்வுருவில் ஏத்தினும் அப்பேருருவில் அப்பொருளை காண்வழியது ஆயினும் அம்மெய்ப்பொருளின் உண்மையில் தன் உண்மையை ஓர்ந்து ஒடுங்கி ஒன்றுதலே உண்மையில் காணுதல். What is darshana? We can have darshana of that nameless and formless supreme in any name and form that we wish to give it, but it is only a mode, a means of seeing that nameless and formless in that name and form. However, to search for in the truth of the Supreme, to search for one's own truth, subside into the truth of the Supreme and abide as that truth, is to have real darshan. That means to be the self, is to see the self, is what Bhagavan has begun with. The second verse onwards in this Viveka from 8 to 22, he is going to allot some names and take those names to the source. எப்பெயரிட்டு எவ்வுருவில் ஏத்தினும், he is not going to give some names of individuals or people or deities or gods, but he is going to give names for the practical experience of the human being. From the practical experience of the human being, what is this whole world? And from that, he is going to take us to the Ishvara, not stop there, but take us to the self. The first name he gives in this verse number 9 is Irattaigal Muppudigal. He gives the name for the Supreme Being, that the Supreme Being can be divided as Irattaigal Muppudigal. So that is the name given, but that is only a means of seeing the Supreme in that name and form. So what we are going to do, as is our normal practice, apply the truth found in verse number 8 right through to verse number 22. Let us see the verse number 9. இரட்டைகள் முப்புடிகள் என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ்வொன்றேதென்று கருத்தின் உள் கண்டால் கழலும் அவை கண்டவரே உண்மை கண்டார் கலங்காரே கான். கலங்காரே கான் is the verse. இரட்டைகள் முப்புடிகள் என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ்வொன்றேதென்று கருத்தினுள் கண்டால் கழலும் அவை கண்டவரே உண்மை கண்டார் கலங்காரே கான். Now, even to begin with, we will find that the commentators on Bhagavan's teachings will refer to the Ondru Patri, which is going to come till verse number 22. The Ondru Patri, they are going to take it as Ahankara. And since this Ahankara is going to be at the source of the root division of the scene, the root division of the universe, we are calling it as Ishvara. We will explore that as we go. இரட்டைகள் முப்புடிகள் என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ்வொன்று ஏதென்று கருத்தினுள் கண்டால் கழலும் அவை கண்டவரே உண்மை கண்டார் கலங்காரே is the verse. Before we go even into the meaning of the verse, I want to introduce a small concept and understanding which will be underlying all these verses. Like it said, very traditional accepted concept and very practically experienced concept that I had sent a video to the group involved in this thing. You can ask Revathi if you want. That video is on emergence of universal consciousness. I had sent that video. We get some idea as to what the sadhana Bhagavan is asking us to do, though the video itself doesn't go into that aspect of it. But it is instructive as to the processes involved. Basically, the video is on organized structures and what is the disorganization and what is that consciousness which is beyond organization and disorganization. The basic idea is anything in creation, including the whole of creation, can be seen as a whole or as a sum of parts. If we call a person as the sum total of the bodily parts, the sum total of some memories, the sum total of some knowledge that he has or she has, and that together, let us say we call it as Nanda Kumar. So this Nanda Kumar, according to that understanding, which is understood by practically all scientific thinkers, all philosophical thinkers, that the entity Nanda Kumar is greater than the sum of the parts. The entity electron is greater than the energy that has gone into it to make it up. The atom is greater than the electrons and protons that are put together in it. Like that, the earth is greater than the people and the things that are in it. And the earth itself is a part of a galaxy. Galaxy is made of many such constituents like earth and some stars. But merely by adding the stars and the planets, you cannot get what is the galaxy. The sum total whole is more than the part. And that we can easily understand that there is something that aggregates. There is something that aggregates Nanda Kumar and calls ignorantly that this is me, this is Nanda Kumar. So the addition, mere addition is not enough. There should be an aggregation or attachment identity which makes it greater than the sum of the parts. Something is there. Now suppose you name it as attachment or gravity or electromagnetic force, then that also becomes a part. If you identify a force and say that that is what is bringing all these together, because the ego is already something apart, then whatever the ego can hold or identify or see, that also becomes a part. So it cannot be the whole. The whole cannot be perceived by the ego. What is it that brings everything together? Cannot be perceived by the part, because it is something greater than the part. This, if you have in mind, that is what is the crux of that video. It's about 20 minutes or so, or 17 minutes, I think. The crux, as far as we are concerned, is the whole is greater than the parts, because there is something, the ego that aggregates, the ahankara that aggregates. So the ahankara has the freedom, as the Sadguru says in these verses, to de-identify from the parts, to free itself of the parts. When it is compulsorily freed due to the laws of thermodynamics called entropy and all that, what that law says, it's very simple, that as soon as an organism comes, any exchange of energy means it is going to move towards destruction. We postpone destruction by various intelligent ways, but we can never avert it. So the gathering of Nandakumar together, we call it as life. The disintegration of Nandakumar into the parts, we call it as liberation of energy. The energy which had called itself as sum of the parts, now it has got released, and the parts go back to their basic nature. That is what we call as the duality of birth and death. Now, the duality of birth and death is also included in this verse. So we can go into the verse, unless anybody has any doubt about the concept of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. In management, they call it a synergy. The team, the effort of the team is always greater than the sum of the parts of the team members, they say. They call it as synergy. And those who are doing Atma Ucharam, we clearly know that the I is aggregating many of the parts together and calling itself as me. Is there any doubt on this? Because we are going to use this throughout these verses, because Bhagavan is going to divide the experience, the world, into some component parts, and then he is going to say all these component parts are dependent on one ego. Search for the truth of the ego, then you need not wait for the destruction of the parts. You can free the energy from the parts, you can disassociate the energy from the parts right here, right now. That's what Bhagavan teaches. So if you have some difficulty with this concept, you can get back to me later also, that there is something in the organized setup, the whole, which is greater than the mere sum of the parts. And let us go into the verse. இரட்டைகள் முப்புடிகள் என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம். So the whole experience of ours, which we call as the world, is popularly divided as இரட்டைகள். What? The sensory objects are divided as, they are so multiple, they are divided as merely dual. Yes, we should go back to verse number 6, where Bhagavan says, the mind is the one which through the five senses perceives the multiplicity of objects. Therefore, the multiplicity of objects is nothing but the mind. So from here on, you will find that Bhagavan assumes we have understood that, understood the verse number 6, and he will be dealing with the universe as merely mental, merely thought-based. So when he is asking us to go to the roots of thought, root of thoughts, he is asking us to go to the root of the sensory objects also. He won't be telling again and again. Deliberately that is left so that we actually transcend. In practice, we should actually transcend by nididhyasana. Merely Shravana and Manana is not enough. Should actually practice so that our consciousness abides in the self, and one transcends the sensory world. So that will not, the connection will not be given again. The sadhana only will be given from here on. No reference will be made to the sensory world. We will have to make that connection ourselves. Irattaigal Muppudikal. The world experience is divided into irattaigal. As I said, quite crudely perhaps, that the whole of experience can be divided into organization and disorganization, or birth and death, appearance and, if you want to put it subtly, Bhagavan would always use whatever appears also disappears. So in Jnana Marga, we don't need to use the terms of birth and death. We suffice that we use the words appearance and disappearance, but what is referred to should not lose sight of. Irattaigal Muppudikal. So the scene experience for anyone is divided into life and death, good and bad, like, dislike. In fact, it can be anything. Because anything you put a pinpoint on, the rest is always there. You can always say me and the not me. The self and the non-self is a duality. That will be a popular duality Bhagavan will be using throughout in the talks. Are there two selves? Bhagavan will ask, as self and non-self. Are there two selves? He will keep on asking, attacking that duality. But only to release us from the bondage to, the false bondage to the scene. So the scene is divided into irattaigal, dualities, birth and death, knowledge and ignorance. Knowledge and ignorance, Bhagavan is going to spend some time. 2-3 verses is going to allot, because obviously the path we have taken is Jnana Marga. So Bhagavan will be spending some time on the duality, specific duality of Jnana and Ajnana. But let's get back to the root. The irattaigal Muppudikal. The scene experience can also be divided as the seer, seeing, seen. Of course, for the 5 senses, you can have 5 triads. Knower, act of knowing, known. We can always recall what Bhagavan instructs F.H. Humphreys. Do not follow the multiplicity of phenomena, or not even the act of perceiving the phenomena, but focus only on that which perceives, that which is the root or cause for all these to happen, the seeing and the seen to come into existence. Hold that, he says to F.H. Humphreys. But coming back to the verse, irattaigal Muppudikal. The scene experience can be divided in the manomayam, in the mind, as the dualities or triads. But all dualities and triads always arise holding on to one. Endrum ondru patri iruppavam. Some of the people who discuss, they wonder whether this one can be the self. Now, we have to understand that there are going to be 3 verses about the ego, on which Bhagavan is going to say, holding on to the ego only, everything arises. So, if you hold that verse in mind, then we can say that whatever we are going to discuss is going to arise only holding the ego. But obviously, it is not the individual ego, it is the universal ego. But the individual and universal itself being a duality, Bhagavan is not going to give us room for that. He will always say only the ego. To Chadwick, who says we should move from the individual mind, I am only paraphrasing in the talks, to the universal mind, is it not? Bhagavan says, who says? Who says that there is a individual mind and a universal mind? So he will not allow us to go into any kind of duality. Irattaigal Muppudikal Endrum, but who is the one who holds the individual mind and the universal mind? Obviously, the guess is yours that it is the common I, common to all, not to any particular individual. Irattaigal Muppudikal Endrum ondru patri iruppavam. They arise holding on to one, the ego. ஒன்றேதென்று கருத்தினுள் கண்டால். Forget about the dualities. Always inquire into for whom is this duality. So, as it has become sometimes my practice, I had gone downstairs to talk to my mother and her attendant about the verse, about this verse, Irataigal, Muppudigal. So, Amma was saying about the pain in her leg. So, we moved from there, that how one of the dualities is the pain and the pleasure, that there is a comfort that comes, but both are limited. Both are the obverses of each other. If there is a pleasure, then there is a pain waiting. If there is a pain, then obviously we try to get relief of it, because there is something other than that called pleasure. Both rise together. If all dualities rise together. If there is a rich man, the richness arises along with the poverty, along with the obverse of poverty, and there is always fear of poverty in somebody who is attached to richness. So we were discussing how the pain alternates with pleasure and both are not real, and how that duality, whenever the pain allows, one has to at least then take it to the source. For whom is the pain or pleasure? For whom is the good or bad? Because the attendant's mother and daughter or sister are dependent on her for their survival and going to school and all that. So her concern will be that let good come upon them, upon the two of them. So what is it to inquire, to hold the eye? So we were discussing what is it that is the source of good and bad. Where? What is the source? What is the source of pleasure and pain? There is an eye holding which the duality, the world of pleasure and pain comes. So when we hold that eye, we don't move into the branch. We don't move into the branch of good or bad. We don't move into the branch of success or failure. We stay at the source, and the drama plays out in front. We do not move anywhere. We are in the same place, the source of the eye. Then whatever happens, it happens around us. As Bhagavan says to Grand Duff, he gets an experience of the light of the heart. As soon as he almost lands up in Ramanashram, he gets the anubhava of this Purana in the chest. And the next day he comes, they are all reading about Pitruloka and the world of those ancestors and all that. And he is reminded of his duty to his mother. So he asks Bhagavan, how am I to be useful to my mother? He is already 70 then. Who has passed away? He asks. And Bhagavan says, if you consider yourself to be a body, then another body from which this body came forth, you call it as mother. But if you consider yourself as the I, then the Chinmayi, the pureness of consciousness beyond birth and death, that is your mother. Holding that, abiding in that, is the service you can do to yourself, to your mother, and to everybody else, he says. There the duality of birth and death are transcended. Where once how to help those who have passed away and are assumed to be somewhere, they are all where? They are all here. They are all in the Atmaswarupam. They are all not somewhere. They are all in the very source of birth and death is inside us. Endrum ondru patri iruppavam. All these dualities and triads, they all arise holding on to one Moola Ahankara, one Ahankara. Now inquire into the truth of that Ahankara. Inquire into the truth of that which rises as I. Then what happens? It subsides as that awareness which has no rise, no fall, no appearance, no disappearance, no like, no dislike, no good, no bad, no birth, no death. என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ்வொன்றேதென்று கருத்தின் உள் கண்டால். Where should we find this? The source of the I, the source of the ego, which is the source of dualities and triads. We have to find within us, within our consciousness. If we try to find it outside our consciousness, already we would have limited ourselves and whatever that we are going to find. So the duality of consciousness and non-consciousness, inside and outside, would have already come. So by the very definition of this has to come from within. This has to be found within the one. என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ் ஒன்று ஏது என்று. What is that one? When we inquire, கடலும் அவை, along with the raising eye, the dualities and triads, they just vanish. They just drop away. They are all dismantled. We don't wait for disintegration by the process of second law of thermodynamics, or with great difficulty with medicines, with that and this, try to keep it organized and keep it going for some more time. We don't do that, and we liberate the consciousness, or we find that liberation is our very nature. We were never really bound to seek liberation. என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ் ஒன்று ஏது என்று கருத்தினுள் கண்டார். When we inquire into ourselves and find the source of that I, the rising I, to be the self without a rise and fall, without birth and death, கடலும் அவை. The dualities and triads, they just drop away as unreal. In the face of the self-attentive reality, in the face of this Purana that finds no other, in the face of the Atman, which has no Anatman, in the face of the Mayaham, which alone is, all the non-self vanish. All the dualities and triads, they go away, they vanish. கடலும் அவை கண்டவரே உண்மை கண்டார். The one who has found the source of this I alone has found the truth. That means whatever games we have played with good and bad, with promotions and demotions, with posts and non-posts, with work and non-work, all these are only unreal games that we have chosen to be enamored with. And now the unenamored, the unalloyed bliss of the self, Unmai, is the true bliss into which we merge. Unmai kandar kalangare kan. Can there be any disturbance? Can there be any movement? Can there be any chanchalate? Can there be any kind of shaking possible for such a one? No, they don't see anything other than the self. That is the verse. Let us summarize the meaning into one possibility, that the dyads and triads arise holding on to an ego. When the truth of the ego is inquired into and the source found, all dyads and all triads, they disintegrate and vanish, and only such a one who has found the source of the ego can be said to have found the truth, and such a one will remain as Aruna Achala, as the undisturbed consciousness, as that consciousness which cannot be moved, which cannot be disturbed by any happening, because this is beyond birth and death, beyond appearance and disappearance. That is the meaning of the verse. இரட்டைகள் முப்பொடிகள் என்றும் ஒன்று பற்றி இருப்பவாம் அவ்வொன்றேதென்று கருத்தினுள் கண்டால் கழலும் அவை கண்டவரே உண்மை கண்டார் கலங்காரே காண். Now let us go into some of the references in talks that Bhagavan gives about இரட்டைகள் and முப்புடிகள். Is there any doubt so far about what we have discussed? Okay. Now in the talks, I am not able to recall the exact number, but two European ladies, I think, they asked Bhagwan about right and wrong, about sin and uh, the concepts of right and wrong. And is it not necessary to hold the right and wrong? As we come through the path of discrimination, we come through the path of Viveka, we will find that one has to have the strength to let go of the earlier sadhana and naturally go with the truth found and take up the next sadhana. As Bhagavan says to many visitors who ask about what about my earlier sadhana, Bhagavan always refers to the process of coming to Tiruvannamalai using many vehicles. He would ask them, how did you come to Tiruvannamalai? They'll say, we left by auto, came to the railway station, took the train to Tiruvannamalai, got down, took a cart and came here. And Bhagavan says, what happened to all those vehicles now that you are here? No, they are no more necessary. Similarly, Bhagavan would say that once you come to Atma Vichara, the earlier sadhanas have done their work. So, what will happen to the choice of good or bad in me is what is discussed in that talk. The ladies are concerned that if we are holding the Atma, holding the I, what will happen to our performance in the world? Because we have always sought to speak the truth, hold the good, be ethical, be non-injurious, do unto others what we would have them do unto us. All these rules we have followed, and to our own benefit of purification of mind, know what we are to do with that. And Bhagavan would take them to the next enquiry, that the very rising of good and bad in us is sin, he would say. That is, it is said that the sin depends on the subtlety of the enquirer. Like Ravana, it is supposed that in some texts it is said, he has had the experience of even samadhi. Even the temporary samadhi he has experienced. And he has, of course, he was a great scholar in the Vedic thought. It is also said the same of Duryodhana, that he knew everything that was right and wrong. And Venkateshji had put that video where a popular person says that Duryodhana knew what is right and wrong, but simply could not or did not want to carry it out. Now, it is said that in Ravana's case, the coming out of the samadhi and thinking of good and bad itself becomes a sin. That itself is a sin, not any carrying out of action. The slipping from there itself is a sin, they say. So as the intellect gets refined, Bhagavan takes them to that level, that Bhagavan says, the very origin of, not that you should start injuring people now, not that you can behave carelessly or as you want, absolutely not. Where is the question of acting in a world that does not exist or seeking particular pleasures where that does not exist at all? Now, kadalum avai means along with the kadalum, they are all gone. So, such a person cannot have any pleasure seeking in that world. That's absolutely ruled out. But the origin of the right and wrong itself is a sin, says Bhagavan to those ladies, that the very origin of right and wrong is sin. In another talk, Bhagavan says, to think that I am man is the origin of sin. So the man and God, or man and that which is beyond man, if we have that division, the very rising of thought that I am a man is the origin of sin, says Bhagavan. So the origin of sin, both papa and punya become papa to the self-enquirer. Any rising of thought, one has to take to the source. But gently, see, gently we keep practicing till the nature of the consciousness changes. So the question from the ladies is, what happens to the dharma? How do we carry out the dharma? Because we have a process. Now we have said that we have to take it to the source of the duality, but we still have roles in the duality and we are not able to sustain the abidance in the source. Then Bhagavan says the good and the bad will happen, the abidance in the good will happen intuitively. Intuitively means that the very abidance in the self is the validation of whatever has happened. Whatever has happened is all right when one rests in the source of all duality. Till then, those who are used to coming to the source, till then there is no real rest. Because whatever may have been done, there will always be the doubt from the intellect whether that could have been done better, whether that was the right, whether something was left undone. So, to take the duality to the source is to take it beyond all doubt. Because doubt and certainty is also a root duality of the intellect. The intellect throws this as a shadow and a false light on the whole world. The whole world is divided into doubt and certainty. Sometimes we seem to be certain about what we do, sometimes we seem to have doubt, but that's a duality. That the same thing that we did certainly, when we have different knowledge, we may start questioning. Therefore, Bhagavan says to go to the root of what holding which the two arise, certainty and doubt. That is crossing of the intellect. The intellect raises these two. For whom is the doubt? For whom is the false clarity? If you ask, to me, who am I? It takes one beyond the plane of the false ego getting involved in the world of good and bad. So the whole world, which is now shaded in light and dark, is now withdrawn. The self-attention, the attention attending on itself is a Purna Vastu. Bhagavan says in Upadesha Saram, Ahami Nasha Bhaji, the relative I being destroyed, Aham Taya, as I, the root of self-attention, the source of self-attention, Spurati Hrit Swayam. In the heart, there is this shining, the self-luminous shining of the self, the Purna Vastu. Till then, till the world, the individual and God, all the three are rolled into that Spurana, one should continue searching the truth of the I. For whom is the good and bad? For whom is the right and wrong? For whom is the like and dislike? When we ask, obviously, the Nandakumar is not waiting for the disintegration of Nandakumar. The disintegration of the things I have aggregated and calls it just like an atom has a whole sense of having gathered together its energy. I have gathered some parts and I am calling it as Nandakumar, and I am trying to postpone the entropy by giving right type of food, right diet, walk, that, this, medicine, go for this knowledge. But we can postpone the entropy. They say in the talk which we have seen through the video, he says that entropy is crossed by some natural work of, he says, the spiraling shape that we find in hermit crabs, the spiraling shape we find in the various galaxies. They are all ways in which the destruction is postponed. So we also have intelligence, the consciousness, which tries to push the entropic state, the destructive state, as much as possible. But definitely we have to meet that point where no more the consciousness can hold on to the entity. He refers to how the electrons, when they are in a cell, when they are in an atom, they are moving at very great speed. But because they can sense each other's force, like both charges being the same, they repel and they keep that distance between them. He asks us why that should not be called as consciousness. That is still consciousness. And how in the Large Hadron Collider, what they do, they increase the speed of the fundamental particles. That's why it's called as accelerating the fundamental particles. When they are accelerated, like in the road accident happens when you go at super speed, the acceleration, it hits the other fundamental particles and those are forcibly broken. They are given their end forcibly by the other fundamental particle hitting it, and the scientists want to see if what are the further fundamental particles that can be seen in that process. But without waiting for destruction of the body or the de-identification from whatever I have gathered as Nandakumar, let's say somebody calls me something. What a foolish life you have led. You have caused so much trouble to all. You are totally useless person. Somebody says, then that which I have gathered as Nandakumar, as psychically, as some thoughts, I am a good person and all that. And when they say that with lot of emotion and that, then that gets a break. Instead of waiting for somebody coming and doing that and feeling the hollow, the feeling that that vacancy, that who am I, that am I none of this, we voluntarily let go of the parts of the body, the parts of thought which we have gathered, and to say that I am a good person, gather that. When somebody comes and questions that, and with their great intellect in a refined way, they exactly point out where all you have made mistakes, and you suddenly feel hollow about it. Bhagavan says, don't wait for that. Don't wait for that. Find out what is this I which is aggregating. Pindam meviya nadane, Brahmandam meviya nadanai, says Satyamangalam Venkatramana in Ramana Sadguru. What it means, that energy which combines and holds on to these parts in this pindam is the same energy that holds the entire cosmos together. Find out what that is. What is the truth of that? So far as it is holding something together, it will feel identified with the sum of the parts and feel that I am going to die. That consciousness which has no birth and death, by identifying by this limited entity, by aggregating the parts together, by aggregating experience together and say I am a good person, because of its identity, because of its attachment, because of its aggregation, it is going to feel I am going to die. I am worthless person. I am a useless person. I have value only when I work. I see many of my retired colleagues. I see somebody who is working has had tremendous work over the last 6-7 months. That see, when we work so lovingly, we don't even know in which place we are. But we are attached to the work. Now on promotion, when that work is taken away, there is a sudden gap because we feel that work is what is giving us happiness. So when workaholism happens, we falsely identify with that and we feel that is what is giving us happiness. Bhagavan says, inquire now itself. Don't wait for these gaps to come or retirement to affect you. But even while working, ask for whom is work and non-work. The duality of getting high post and non-high post. Value from high post and non-high post. For whom is that? Those values arise holding one. The workaholism and the laziness, they arise from holding on to one. Even while working, hold on to the center. Bhagavan says to someone, why do you think that you are moving from one place to another? You understand that you are centered here only and the scenery is changing around you. Everything is changing around you. Even when your body is moving, don't say I have moved. You don't move. The time, the place, the events, everything is changing around you. That's what I was sharing with my mother. All one has to do to stop this journeying from here to there, which is another duality, is to hold to the source of here and there. Is to hold to the source, then one need not go here or there. Pokum varavumil poduveli, says Bhagavan. There, that space where there is no going and coming, that is what you are. Not the individual caught up in this game of dualities and triads. Let go of the dualities and triads. Find out for whom is this. Find the truth of the I, then the dualities and triads drop away and one can rest in that Parandhama Sthiti, in that state where there is no duality, no triad, no appearance, no disappearance. As was said in verse number 7, that consciousness which rises and falls, should have that substrate of consciousness which does not have any change. And that consciousness, the Arunachala, which has no change, that is what we are. With Bhagavan's immense grace, let us hold the I and find out the truth of the I, holding which the dualities and triads rise. Let us not get carried away into dualities and triads by following thoughts, but inquire for whom is this thought. The answer will come. This thought is for me. Who am I? Will be the inquiry into the source of all dyads and triads. So once we clearly understand this verse, we should understand that whenever we are doing self-inquiry, we are going to the source of all dyads, all triads. So let us keep up the practice of Atma Vicharam. When a thought arises, not pursue it and get lost in the dualities and triads, but diligently inquire, for whom is this thought? This thought is for me. Who am I? Let us sit in practice till 8 o'clock. Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana.